Hello, everybody, and welcome to season 2 of I'm Not the Book Expert, but She Is. I am Rachel, and this season's expert is Maggie.
It's me. I'm Maggie. Hello. Welcome back, everybody. We are so excited to be recording season two and just ready to have a good time with this season.
Yes, indeed. I'm so excited.
So, I'll just tell you real quick. I mean, like, you probably already know this, but we are going to be talking about the series Percy Jackson and the Olympians during this season. That's by Rick Riordan. So we're going to be talking. I know he's written like a heck ton of books. So we are just going to be talking about the first five along with some supplemental stuff. So that's The Lightning Thief, The Sea of Monsters, The Titan's Curse, Battle of the Labyrinth, and The Last Olympian. And we might be throwing in some special things here and there, but we'll talk more about that in a little bit.
That is not to say that we are not going to do the other Rick Riordan books at later points, but for right now, we are focusing on the original 5 Percy Jackson books.
Yeah, as much as I would like for this to become like a Riordan verse fan podcast, fan cast, is that what you call them still? I'm really dating myself.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. But as much as I would enjoy that, that's not what this is. So we're trying to kind of space out that content to bring you some other exciting things as well. But yeah, I'm very excited to talk about the first 5 Percy Jackson books with Rachel. But before we do that, it's been a couple weeks since we've recorded, and it's been a couple weeks since we've last released an episode. And in our season 1 wrap up, we talked a little bit about the things that we wanted to read during our like break / hiatus / recovery period. So Rachel, let's talk about what you read.
Why don't we talk about what you read first? Because mine is going to be significantly longer.
Oh, I get to go first?
Yeah, I think it'll be a better idea if you go first.
Okay, I shall go first. So I had a small handful of books that I said I wanted to read in our wrap up episode, and I should have gone back and checked what they were, but I didn't. I think I read all of them. So I'll just rattle off the books that I read over the break real quick. I read Fable and Namesake by Adrienne Young. I read The City Beautiful by Aidan Polydorus. That was one of my favorites that I read back in, I think, April it was. It was really, really good. I read This Poison Heart by Kaylin Bayron. I read the Iliad and the Odyssey. So those, if you're not familiar with them, they are epic poems from ancient Greece. I did not read them in Greek because I am not that smart. I actually listened to both of them. I listened to the Robert Fagel's translation of the Iliad, and I actually listened to a community project. So I'll go on this little tangent real quick. If you're in the video game sphere, you might know the game Hades, which was released. It was fully released back in 2020, I think it was, or yeah, I think it was 2020. It's fairly recent, but a bunch of like Twitch streamers and like video game like content creators came together and they did a community like audio recording of the Iliad as a way of like connecting over this shared story, because Hades, as you might guess from the title, is based on Greek mythology. So all that to say, that's what I listened to, and it was actually really good, and it's free on the internet. So if you want to listen to the Iliad, I'll link that in the description for this episode. And then I listened to the Emily Wilson translation of the Odyssey. I also read Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. That was another favorite. I read Fire Becomes Her by Rosie Thor. A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. I listened to a newer translation of Beowulf, just because I've been meaning to. That was the translation by Maria Davana Headley. I read The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, which we will be talking about later this season as sort of a bonus after we get to the end of our Percy Jackson book. So there's something for you to look forward to if you're a Madeline Miller fan. I also read two graphic novels. They are Shay's Story and Cutters, which are like graphic novel adaptations slash alternate perspectives of the Scott Westerfeld's Uglies series, which are, I don't want to say they're old because they're not that old, but they're from a little while ago.
I would define them as like old YA.
Yeah. They were like, they were kind of like the before young adult dystopian was really big, like they were the young adult dystopia books, like before like the Hunger Games and like Divergent and that sort of era. This was kind of the beginning of that era. So I read Shay's Story like 1,000 years ago. And then I found them both at a used bookstore and I read them and they were okay. They weren't really my favorite, but they were okay. And finally, the best book on my list, I read I Am Pusheen the Cat by Claire Belton. It is, if you know the cartoon cat Pusheen, it is basically a picture book about Pusheen. 10 out of 10 would recommend. Very adorable.
Love it.
So that's enough about what I've been reading. Let's talk about Rachel now.
I don't even know where to start with this.
Let's start with how many books you read.
The number?
Yes, the number.
I read 40 books during our recording hiatus. So the last time we left off, I had read 58 books and I am now at 98 books. And if you listened to our season 1 wrap-up episode, I think I mentioned the fact that I have a bet going on with a student, and he said that I wouldn't make it to 100 books by the end of the school year, and I genuinely thought I wasn't going to make it. We have like 2.5 weeks left of school at the time of this recording, and I only need to read 2 more books.
I think she's going to make it.
I'm hoping so, because I'm coming out of a reading slump now, which was really hard. But Maggie, should I run through the 40 books that I read?
I think so, but I also think some of them you can probably like group together a little bit.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna like go into detail about I think any of them. Maybe a couple, specifically number 39, I might talk about a little bit, but I think it's fair.
Let's get through the list first.
Yeah. And I'm actually gonna start at 40 and go to 1 because 40 is what I read the longest time ago.
Gotcha.
So a Psalm of Storm and Silence by Roseanne A. Brown. Met her, love her. The Insiders by Marco Shiro, who is writing a Percy Jackson adjacent book. And he is just the sweetest human being. I got to hear him talk and I love him. And I'm so excited to see what he does with it. The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. Pride and Premeditation, as well as Sense and Second Degree Murder by Tirza Price. We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. She also wrote The Lottery, Written in Bone by Sue Black, The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, Revenge of the Witch by Joseph Delaney, Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus, Orpheus Ghosts by Justina Ireland, Coraline by Neil Gaiman, Holes by Louis Sakar, Scout's Honor by Lily Anderson, Curse of Bane by Joseph Delaney, The Night of the Soul Stealer by Joseph Delaney, The Witch Haven by Sasha Payton Smith, These Hollow Graves by Jennifer Donnelly, The Agathas by Kathleen Glasgow, The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman. Apparently I was on a Neil Gaiman kick. The Amateurs by Sarah Shepard, You'll Be the Death of Me by Karen M. McManus, All These Bodies by Kendare Blake, Attack of the Fiend by Joseph Delaney, The Book of Living Secrets by Madeline Rowe, Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston, whom I love, Cultish by Amanda Montell, Follow Me by Sarah Shepard, Flea Market Magic by Bella Falls, To Break a Covenant by Allison Ames, Truly Devious, as well as the accompanying books by Maureen Johnson, Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover, Oddity by Eli Brown, The Ghost of Rose Hill by R.M. Romero, Maybe Not by Colleen Hoover, The Bone Orchard by Sarah A. Mueller, and finally, Year of the Reaper by Mekia Lucier.
So everyone at home, you can rest assured that Rachel did get her reread of the Truly Devious series in on the midst of all this. She has
Yes, I
read them
did.
all again. She is 5 for 5 months now.
Yes, I am. And for the month of May, I was almost 1-to-1 for books per day. In the
That's
month of
insane.
May, I read 28 books in 31 days.
Rachel, I have a question
Yes,
to ask you.
I potentially have an answer.
You doing okay over there?
Uh, if you follow our TikTok, Book Expert Pod, you will notice that I posted two of my monthly recaps. One of them, normal speed, the other one, super fast to match a sound. I'm okay. I'm fine.
Well, you're going to be more than fine because we are talking about Percy Jackson this season, and that makes everything okay.
I am so excited.
So I think that's a good transition into talking a little bit about the upcoming season. So I'm going to go ahead and just talk. I didn't write a whole lot of notes, but yeah. So Percy Jackson and the Olympians, right? I think a lot of people are probably familiar with this series. Even if you haven't read it, you probably have at least heard of it. And if you haven't heard of it, I've got great news for you. I'm going to talk about it right now. Um, for those unfamiliar, Percy Jackson is a series where there's just this kid. He's kind of seen as a troublemaker. He hasn't really had it easy. His name's Percy Jackson. And he has some incidents through which he learns that the gods and monsters of ancient Greece aren't just myths after all. They are real and they are active in the world. I almost said the modern world, but like also this first book was published in 2005. So like it's the modern world, but like it's like 15 years ago, modern world.
I think I was 10. In 2005, I was 10.
I was 7.
That was the year my youngest sibling was born.
Aww.
I feel really old now because he's a sophomore in high school and I teach sophomores. That
Ooh.
that was 17 years ago.
Ooh. The Percy Jackson series is old enough to drive now in the United States. Not quite old enough to vote yet, unfortunately, but
And
soon.
definitely not old enough to drink yet.
Probably for the best.
I feel like we would have a lot of drunk half-bloods. But I also think for good reason.
Yeah.
They've been traumatized.
Yeah, but we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. As Rachel just kind of alluded to, Percy ends up at this place called Camp Half-Blood in Long Island, New York. And it is there that he learns that not only are the gods and monsters of ancient Greece still around, but the gods of ancient Greece are also going around and fancying mortals as the gods of ancient Greece often did and do.
Fornicating.
That's surely a word for it. And Percy learns that he is the result of one of those relationships. He is a demigod. He is the son of a mortal. His mom's name is Sally Jackson. She may as well be a goddess, but she is in fact mortal. And he is also the child of a god. He doesn't know who. He never met his father. And so the Lightning Thief kind of follows Percy's journey into discovering who his father is and kind of learning what it means to be a hero in a lot of ways. And the rest of the series follows different adventures that Percy goes on, whether he's invited to them or not. And it's just, there's a lot going on. As I said at the beginning of the show, we are going to be talking about the 5 books in the original Percy Jackson series. There's also a sequel series called The Heroes of Olympus, which we're going to save for another time. And then there's technically a sequel series to that series called The Trials of Apollo. There's also some sort of adjacent series. There's the Kane Chronicles, which is about ancient Egypt, and that's Rachel's personal favorite.
Yes,
And
it
then
is.
there's yes, and then there's the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard book, which is about Norse mythology, as you might suppose. Um, so that's just kind of a very large overview. So anyway, we were going to talk about these 5 books, and then I just whacked my microphone. We were going to talk about these 5 books, and then we decided there were some other sort of like bonus supplemental things we wanted to include in here. So in between our book discussions, as we're going through these 5 books, we're also planning to talk about the Broadway musical adaptation of The Lightning Thief, which is one of my personal favorite things in the world. You also may have heard that there are some Hollywood films that were made based on the first 2 books of the Percy Jackson series.
There are no movies in Ba Sing Se.
There are no movies in Ba Sing Se, but we did find something. But Rachel and I did think it would be fun. These are not widely loved movies. Let's put it that way. If you haven't seen them, you're not missing out on much. And if you haven't seen them, I've got great news. Rachel and I are going to watch them for you, and we're going to tell you about them in a bonus episode. And somewhere in here, I also want to talk about one of the bonus books. There's a couple of supplemental, like short story collections or just like fun books that are technically part of the Percy Jackson canon. And the one that sort of fits in with these books is called The Demigod Diaries. So there's a couple of short stories in there and some like fun little anecdotes and things. And so Rachel and I will also be reading that when the time comes. And yeah, that'll take us through the Percy Jackson books. And then we're going to have a bonus episode at the end of this season, which you'll see. I think Rachel's going to talk to us about the Song of Achilles, which is not a Percy Jackson book, but it's like Greek mythology and it's close enough.
I couldn't think of another season that it would fit into, and I think it's a very approachable way to get into Greek mythology as an adult. And I think it's absolutely ironic that for that one episode, we're going to flip expertise because I was not a Greek mythology person growing up, right? Like we've talked about the fact that I was an Egyptian mythology person, Greek mythology, Roman mythology, not my thing. But it was very much Maggie's thing. So the fact that we're flip-flopping for that episode, I am living for.
Yes. Rachel is taking the lead on the Song of Achilles because she read it before I did. So I did just finish reading it and I did enjoy it, but I think by the time this season is done, I will be all talked out and I will be happy to let Rachel take the reins.
But if you are dreading any of the episodes, Maggie, which I don't understand why you would, just remember
never
that next season you get your revenge because I have to lead the entire next season.
And I will look forward to that. Do we know what we're doing next season yet? Not exactly, but that's a conversation for another time.
We have vibes, which for me is enough to start writing a new story. So, like, it's enough.
That's fair. So, Rachel, tell me about how you got into Percy Jackson. What was your you weren't a Greek mythology kid growing up. I was.
No, I was not.
So tell me about your experience with Percy Jackson and how you've gotten to where you are today.
So I had a bit of a complicated relationship with Percy Jackson. When I was in high school, my best friend was really into them. So she was like, you need to read these books. Like, it's super important that you read them. Like, I love these books so much. So I actually read 1 through 3. So I read 1 through 2.5. I read The Lightning Thief, I read Sea of Monsters, and I made it halfway through The Titan's Curse. And then I watched the movies and I went, no, thank you. And I never picked up another one again. Do I regret that now? A little bit. However, I did read all of the Kane Chronicle books as they were coming out. So I have my first edition, like Red Pyramid and Throne of Fire, as my little brag moment, but I didn't read the Percy Jackson series beyond those 2.5. And then last year, when I was getting back into reading, I was reading Crooked Kingdom, which I still haven't finished because I know what happens and it makes me emotional. And, and I was telling Maggie about how emotional I was. And she was like, oh, you should read the Percy Jackson books. Like, they aren't as sad. They'll make you feel better. And if you've read the Percy Jackson books, as I've said about some other books, this isn't a book that you want to read if you want to feel joy and happiness.
I will admit my guilt. I did say that to Rachel. I do have a defense. I also think that the Percy Jackson books, by and large, do bring a measure of joy and happiness.
Yes, but they're also traumatizing and
let me finish. You're scaring the listeners away, Rachel. You're scaring the listeners away. I am the expert here, and I shall be our guide along this journey of emotions and tears and hopefully joy at some point. So I'm gonna circle back to this, I promise. So my introduction to Percy Jackson was actually through the films that don't exist. They were part of like a free summer movie thing that one of our local theaters did growing up. And my mom, because she was like, I deal with these kids all the time, I need to do something where they will be entertained. So she would take us to these movies, and they were showing Percy Jackson. And I was like, this is a moderately okay movie. And one of the friends that I went with, she had actually read the books, and she's like, this movie sucks. Of course, we were like 11, so we did not actually say sucks because we would have been in trouble. But they do suck. That is factual. Anyway, this friend then convinced me to read the rest of the Percy Jackson books, which I did, and I just fell in love. And yeah, that's where we are today. So Percy Jackson was a lot more of my growing up experience than it was for Rachel. And so for me, it is a comforting read, partly because I know how it ends and I know that everything turns out okay in the end. And I realized my mistake when I said to Rachel, this is a comforting series to read, that she did not know how things ended up, and she did not experience necessarily the same comfort that I did. But all that to say, the Percy Jackson series is middle grade fiction. So it is not necessarily, some would argue against this, but I would say it is not necessarily as dark or violent as some young adult fiction might be, or adult fiction might be. However, there is these characters do face very real danger. They are often in peril, and there are characters who die throughout the series. So it is not necessarily lighthearted, but I would say it is considerably less tense than reading like a thriller novel or other like young adult and adult fiction. Does that seem fair to you, Rachel?
I think that is fair. I also want to say at the time where I was initially reading these books, like back in high school, first of all, I was in high school. And second, I was also reading a lot of James Patterson and like murder mystery books, which I still love murder mysteries. That's my whole thing. But I was also reading a lot of adult literature, so I did not appreciate more high school middle grade literature.
I think that makes sense.
And I love them now. So like
it all worked out the way it was supposed to.
Indeed.
But again, that is why I am the expert.
Indeed.
I know things. This is like my one area of expertise. You ask me anything else on any given day, I'm just like, huh?
The number of like random times where I'm just like thinking about Percy Jackson and I text Maggie like in all capital letters. My phone automatically now corrects Maggie to all capital letters, along with a couple other names, but Maggie is one of the big ones. And I'll just like send her this random thought, and I'm like, I need an answer to this. And she's like, I am at work. And I'm like, yes, so am I. And then we'll talk about it after work. But it kills me that I have these random thoughts and I send them to her. And like sometimes they're really valid, and sometimes they're just totally out of the blue and unrelated to anything that is relevant to the books.
Sometimes I see things that Rachel sends me and I'm just like, huh? What?
I think I have really good questions, though.
You do. And then sometimes I'm just like, Rachel, no one has ever asked that before, which does not mean it's a bad question. It just means I was ill prepared.
I have weird questions.
Don't we all? So, the Percy Jackson series, as I said, is based on the fact that there is a camp for demigods, right? There's a camp for the children who have a god and a mortal for parents. And these kids are organized into cabins based on who their godly parent is, etc., etc. There's all kinds of stuff. You get special abilities based on which god you are descended from. On the Rick Riordan website, there is an official "What God are you descended from?" personality quiz. Now, there's other personality quizzes out there. There's stuff on BuzzFeed, there's stuff on Tumblr. This is the real deal. So, Rachel and I are going to take this quiz together in real time, and we are going to tell you what Rick Riordan says our Greek god parent would be.
Are we going to read the questions like we did with the Merciful Crow and the Faithless Hawk?
Yes, let's take turns.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
I will go first. I hope they go in the same order for us, but I'm pretty sure they do.
I think so.
Which of these is your favorite color? Blue, green, gold, pink, silver, or black?
I know mine.
What is yours, Rachel?
Mine is black.
Black. I'm not surprised. I'm going to go with blue for mine.
That's fair. Which of the following places do you prefer? The mall, the beach, a forest, a library, a cemetery, or a concert hall?
Rachel always struggles with this question.
So hard.
I'm going to go with a library.
I wish I could combine forest, library, cemetery. But I think I pretty consistently go with a cemetery because I like to make up stories for people in my head.
I think cemetery is very much your vibe.
Thank you.
All right. Which of these foods is your go-to? Sushi, shish kebab, s'mores, rice cake, tuna, or barbecue ribs?
Sushi.
Sushi is also mine. I love sushi.
Same. Which of these is your favorite pastime? Practicing archery, singing karaoke, exploring a cave, building with Legos, shopping for clothes, or riding a horse?
Mine is building with Legos.
Mine is another three-way split between singing karaoke, building with Legos, and riding a horse because I actually do really like riding horses, but I don't get to do it very often. Yes, I think the last time I rode a horse was back in my first year of college.
I did not know this about you.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
I wasn't like a horse girl growing up or anything. I do get a lot of enjoyment from riding horses.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. But I think I'm gonna go with karaoke, although I do also really like archery.
I was at Barnes and Noble the other day just kind of browsing, and they have like some of like the grown-up Lego sets there, like the buildings and things, and I was looking at them. I was like, man, I love Legos. One of these days when I'm not like trying to save money, I'm gonna buy myself some nice Legos.
Do it. There's a Lego store near me if you ever want to go.
Let's go. All right, the next question is, which of these is your favorite animal? A chihuahua, a dolphin, a Rottweiler, an elephant, an owl, or a deer?
Mine's a tie between elephant and owl because they're my favorite, although deer is a pretty high contender.
Mine is owl, is the one I'm going with.
Owl is what I picked.
Okay.
Which kind of music do you like best? New age, classical, pop, show tunes, cool jazz, or the Grateful Dead?
I don't really listen to any of these genres of music.
Oh, I do. My two biggest ones are probably show tunes of this, show tunes and classical.
That makes sense.
With pop being a third, and then probably jazz as my fourth.
I like some jazz. I've never listened to the Grateful Dead. I don't know how I'd feel about them. I don't know what new age means in terms of music.
It's a genre of music, and that's all I got, so don't ask me more.
Okay. I'm going to go with jazz.
I'm going to go with show tunes.
All right. Which one of these apps would you be most likely to use? Zombie Run, City Planner, Hurricane Tracker, Love Match, Voice Recorder, or Wildlife Calls? I always get stuck on this one. I don't know which one I would pick.
I feel like this sounds so boring, but I feel like I would really enjoy wildlife calls.
That feels like a you vibe.
So actually when we've taken this in the past, I've never selected that one.
Well, then you should pick it this time and see what happens.
Okay, I'm gonna do it.
I think I'm going to go with City Planner. I always get torn between City Planner and Voice Recorder. But I like those kinds of like building and management simulation games. I usually get obsessed with them for a couple weeks and then I never touch them again. So this seems like right up my alley.
What is your fatal flaw? I can be moody. I can be arrogant. I can be vain. I can be too proud. I can be selfish. I tend to distrust people.
How about all of the above?
Right. I need a seventh option that is I tend to trust people too easily, and then when they burn me, I get upset. So I'm gonna go with I tend to distrust people.
I think that's fair. I think I'm going to go with I'm gonna go with I can be too I have a hard time differentiating between arrogant and too proud.
I think that's a fair one to get stuck on.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with arrogant. This has been therapy with Rachel and Maggie. Oh, now we get a nice question. Which is your best quality? I'm an independent worker. I'm creative. I'm a strategic thinker. I'm good at networking. I'm a steadfast friend, or I'm a natural leader.
I always pick the same one here.
What do you pick?
I'm an independent worker.
I also like that one. That's what I'm going with too. Now we have our results. What is yours, Rachel?
Your godly parent is Hades.
I'm so surprised.
I feel like anyone who knows anything about me is not at all surprised by this.
Mine is Athena, which I think checks out.
I concur. So when you get a godly parent of Hades, you get a little blurb. And it says, "Good work. Based on your responses, you have been claimed by Hades. Go ahead and make yourself at home in cabin 13. Train well, don't forget to brush your teeth occasionally, and try not to get sent on a quest. They tend to shorten your lifespan. Your activities director, Chiron."
Yep. I always get disappointed when I take this quiz because I usually end up with Athena. And don't get me wrong, I like Athena. She's fine. But I always wish I could get Artemis because she is a result. I did just check that. That was my little experiment just now. You can appear. So Artemis doesn't actually have any demigod children, which we learned in the series. But she does have a group of hunters that she leads. And so one of the results that you can get on this quiz is you can be a hunter of Artemis. I never get that result, and I'm always a little disappointed. I don't think I'm outdoorsy enough, but I feel like I fit the vibe otherwise.
I would agree.
Anyway, the blurb for Athena is actually the same. Although hers has a typo in it, it shows Athena's picture and then it says, "You're a child of Poseidon." And I'm like, something's not right here.
Oh, that's really funny, especially since they're enemies.
Yep. Athena and Poseidon don't get along for various reasons. But yeah, so now we're going to get matching Camp Half-Blood bracelets that say Child of Hades and Child of Athena, obviously.
Okay, but if you could pick your godly parent, who would you want your godly parent to be?
Oh, I don't know. That's a hard choice.
Yes, well, I'm making you choose.
I don't like it. I was not prepared.
I know, I'm going off script, Maggie.
Do
you know who I would choose?
Hades.
No.
Oh?
Do you want to try again?
No, tell me.
Nyx.
Oh, that's right. You did tell me that once. Nyx is the goddess of the night. She's not as well known as like the Olympian gods, but she is an important figure in mythology.
She is the only god or goddess that Zeus was ever afraid of.
Zeus should have been afraid of more people.
Zeus? I'm not going to say that. Never mind.
Yeah, well, let's just move right along. I will say I did always like Athena growing up. Like that was like of the Olympians, that was like the goddess, or that was the deity that I felt like the most like personality fit me. I think as I grow older, I do kind of like the Hermes vibe of like jack of all trades, master of none. I don't think I am exactly. I don't think I am quite as clever or as much of a nuisance as the children of Hermes are. But I do also like that vibe. And as I said already, I like Artemis as well, but obviously she does not have children.
I don't want people to think that I wouldn't want to be a child of Hades. But if I could choose, I would want to be a child of Nyx.
It's very similar vibes. The god of the dead, the goddess of the night. I'm sensing a theme.
Right. It's very that's just who I am. Let's be
It's
real.
just who Rachel is.
I like to picnic in cemeteries, like, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rachel, one of the things that makes this reading of Percy Jackson so exciting, at least for me, and I think for you as well, is that this is the first time we'll be able to read Percy Jackson knowing that there is a TV series being adapted and has just started filming as of June 2022. So, and since things have started filming, we know who's going to be playing our main trio of characters, as well as some of the important side characters. So I thought we could just talk a little bit about it. I'm sure it'll come up as we talk about the book series.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the trio first. So we have Walker Scobell playing Percy Jackson, Leah Jeffries as Annabeth Chase, and Aryan Simhadri as Grover Underwood.
I'm so excited.
I just, the day that this was announced, like Walker Scobell was announced as Percy Jackson earlier this year. And then
do you remember that conversation?
I remember that conversation.
I almost called you.
She almost called me. And then I found out she sent me a message and I was like, Rachel, you should have called me. So we knew Walker was going to be playing Percy. And then we didn't hear anything for like several weeks, I think at least a month. And then on my birthday, they announced the full trio, Walker, Leah, and Aryan, as the three main characters. And that was one of my favorite birthday presents this year. I know that's not what like Rick Riordan intended, but I'm going to take it as such.
Exactly.
But
they're just so perfect.
And one of the big sticking points with the film adaptations from several years ago was that they cast actors who were older than the main characters. So Percy Jackson and Percy, Annabeth, and Grover are all Percy and Annabeth are 12. Grover's situation is a little bit different, but he's supposed to look like he's in middle school, right? And they cast actors who were in their teens.
Or
for these
20s.
Or 20s in some cases. And it just didn't have the right vibe. So like now we have age appropriate actors for these characters. And it kind of hit me in the chest a little bit because I was like, oh, they're kids.
Yeah.
Like they're just not to say that the actors are not skilled, obviously, but
very
like
skilled.
I think it just kind of hit me all of a sudden, like, oh, these characters are young. They're small children. They are in middle school. So, yeah.
I mean, by the end of this series, the main character is the age of my youngest brother. right?
That's such a wild thought.
And I realized I just said the main character as if we haven't been talking about Percy the entire time.
Spoiler alert, Percy Jackson is the main character of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Another spoiler, there are Olympians involved.
What?
I know, so shocking.
I'm sure we'll talk about this later, so I'm not going to go into detail, but I always think back to what Rick Riordan wanted to name the first book.
We will talk about that in our episodes about the first book, I am sure. So that is one of my favorite, funniest things.
You can look forward to that and how hilarious I find it.
Oh, yes. I do just want to share real quick. So the way that a lot of the news, like the official casting news, has come from Rick Riordan's website, which is just rickriordan.com. So he announced Walker Scobell as Percy back in April 2022. He was most recently in The Adam Project as a younger version of Ryan Reynolds' character. I have not seen The Adam Project, but I heard it was pretty good. So there's that. And I just want to skim through this article. Rick says, aside from being a rising star, Walker is also a super fan of the books, having read everything through the Trials of Apollo. He already owns a Camp Half-Blood t-shirt. And Rick was the one who called him like personally via Zoom to tell him that he had gotten the role. And there is a photo, like there's a screenshot from the call of like his reaction when he finds out. And it is so precious.
Because he's wearing the shirt.
And he's wearing the shirt. So like 10 out of 10. I have not seen this kid act before, but like I like him. He's perfect. And then in the post where he announced Arian as Grover and Leah as Annabeth, he says about Arian, he had me laughing out loud with his delivery and timing. He has a mixture of sweetness, humor, and internal toughness that is perfect for Grover. He has some big flying shoes to fill, but Arian is exactly the right guy for the job. He and Walker already have a great dynamic together. So that makes me very excited because Grover and Percy are besties, right? And I did paraphrase a little bit there to like keep some spoilers out of our conversation, but yeah. And then talking about Leah Jeffries as Annabeth. Out of all of the talented actors we looked for in this role, Leah quickly became my number one choice for Annabeth. A native of Detroit, she is a brilliant actor who can break our hearts, make us laugh, and have us cheering for her all in the same scene. She has been on Empire and some other shows. She recently returned from South Africa, where she wrapped filming on Beast, a forthcoming feature film in which Leah plays the daughter of Idris Elba's character. She's also been in some other things. He says about Leah, and then Rick goes on to say about Leah, she is exactly the way I imagined Annabeth in the books. Smart, strong, and courageous, a true daughter of Athena who has zero patience for the foolishness of a certain other character. Watching her act with Walker and Arian, I saw Annabeth Chase come to life. As soon as you see her on the screen, you will know what I mean. The wise girl has arrived. And then there's a photo of the three of them standing with Rick Riordan, and I just was like, oh my gosh.
Okay, but can we talk about how it looks like Rick Riordan is photoshopped in?
It totally does. It really does. I did.
He is actually there. Like he is in the picture, but it does look like
it does look like he was photoshopped in there. But yes, I wanted to share those bits where like I think it says a lot that the author of these books has been hands-on in this process and has 100%. So much faith in these actors to play like these characters. And like the way that I think about my characters are like my children, right? I'm a writer, I have characters, they're like my children. And I think it says a lot that this author has such high praise for these actors to portray characters that he's worked with for 15 years.
Probably longer than that, right? Because he's
That's
been writing
true.
them before he was published.
Yeah,
I would say like almost 20 years.
probably around that. Yeah. So we've got the main trio, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about them. The other characters, I'm just going to keep this moving along. Sorry, I lost my list. The other characters we have Virginia Cole as Sally Jackson, Percy's mother.
Beautiful.
We have I looked this up. I'm gonna try it. Jason Mantzoukas as Mr. D, who is the camp director. We have
Love him.
We have Megan Mullally as Mrs. Dodds, one of the teachers at Percy's school, who turns out to be not
Not,
quite what she seems.
yep.
We have Glenn Turman as Mr. Brunner / Chiron, the activities director at camp. And we have Tim Sharp as Gabe Ugliano, Percy's stepfather, whom we do not like. The actor seems fine. The character is a piece of garbage.
Yes.
You know what? I will say this. It does take guts to play like a universally disliked character.
Oh, for sure. It's kind of like playing Umbridge in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Like not
I'm going to
even
pretend I
Voldemort.
understood that reference.
Even somebody who has never watched or read Harry Potter would recognize Umbridge. So I have faith that you would know if you saw a picture of her.
Perfect. Yeah. So, and that is all of the news that we've gotten as of this recording in the beginning of June. So, filming has started. Things seem to be going well, according to Rick Riordan's blog. And I'm usually not a visual person when I read. Like, I don't usually see things when I read them, but
I don't either.
When I was rereading The Lightning Thief, which I started rereading after the trio was announced, there were just a couple of scenes where like I could picture, like I could see this happening in my head, and I was like, I don't know how to describe it. It just felt very nice.
Yeah.
And I know that somewhere in the multiverse, 12-year-old Maggie is just screaming from how excited she is. And I'm screaming too. Like me as an adult, I am so incredibly excited for this show that is meant for middle schoolers. But will I watch it? I surely will.
I think it would even be safe to say that when the TV show eventually comes out, we're going to have a season dedicated to it.
Oh, for sure. Or at least have some. We're going to be talking about it on this podcast. Don't you worry out there.
Don't you worry. Maggie, yeah. I am so excited for this season.
Me too. I'm really excited that I get to talk to you about Percy Jackson and just random Greek mythology stuff as it comes up. It's going to be a really good time.
It's going to be delightful.
Well, before we get too emotional, I think we should wrap things up. So we will be back soon with the beginning of season 1. We'll be talking about The Lightning Thief, book 1 of the Percy Jackson series. Our episodes about the books are going to be split into 2 parts because we just have so much to say. So stay tuned for part 1 of The Lightning Thief, and we will see you again soon.
Yes, indeed.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of I'm Not the Book Expert, but She Is. You can find us online at bookexpertpod.wordpress.com or follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at bookexpertpod. If you enjoy our show, please consider leaving us a review on our website or wherever you find your podcasts. We'll see you again soon.